What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Tell Me More podcast presented by the Real Estate Cheat Code. I have Roger Willcut Jr. with us with the Willcut Group at Keller Williams Urban Living. Roger, thanks so much for taking time out of your day to jump on here and to really share your real estate story and your journey.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
So, Roger, we always start with the beginning. What was life like for you growing up as a child? Are you from here? Kind of hobbies, interests, play sports? Did you go to college? Kind of fill me in on the background.
Yeah. So I am from Columbus. So I grew up in Hilliard and then Dublin. Normal childhood. Parents were not in real estate. That's something I find. I feel like a lot of the people, half people are like, yeah, my dad's a realtor. I'm like, oh, okay. So parents were not in real estate whatsoever. My dad, worked as an IT something. Honestly, couldn't tell you exactly, but nothing related to real estate. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. So, had normal interests growing up. It's funny because, you talk to different people and it's like, oh man, I knew this was my passion early on. And that's awesome. I love to hear that. It's cool. I always say that I kind of fell into real estate. It wasn't a passion of mine. I mean, yeah, looking at cool houses was always fun online, but also, I grew up like in the early 90s. I'm 35 years old. So it's not like the internet, we didn't walk around with iPhones in our hands. So it wasn't easily accessible. Just normal kid stuff. So I graduated from Dublin, Jerome. Went to OSU very briefly, did not graduate. Still to this day have not graduated. I don't plan to at this point in my life. But yeah, grew up here in Columbus and lived all around. I mean, Hilliard, Dublin, Grandview, and now I'm in the Arena District where I will stay put.
Yeah. It's funny. We're the same age. And I always say us, that era, I feel like, and I could be wrong, but I feel like that era, the whole college thing was, maybe not so much forced, but it was kind of like in my family, it was kind of like implied a little bit, like, hey, it's just kind of that next step. Back then it was still like hey, you still got to go to college to get a good job. But then when we got out when I got out in 2011, right, the job market wasn't that great, and so I am one. Look, you probably made the right choice of not going back and just leaving. I didn't use my degree and finished. So you probably saved some money. You're probably on the smarter end of the spectrum.
Yeah, it's funny because you're exactly right. It's so funny. I in Hilliard went to Hilliard throughout most of high school, and then I was living in Dublin since I was in 7th grade, and due to the schools being overcrowded, I had to switch my senior year, which is not ideal for anybody to switch high schools their senior year. But, it honestly ended up being like the biggest blessing in my life. One of them, it took me into unfamiliar territory. First off, made me put myself in an uncomfortable situation. All of my best friends that I'd grown up with my entire life continued to go to Hilliard. I was thrown into a new school as a senior in high school. Everyone already has their friends groups. No one's trying to make new best friends senior year of high school. You're about to leave college. But it was so good for me. And actually, I made some of my best friends that I still am in touch with today. Patrick from my team, I met senior year of high school at Dublin. We've been best friends for, since 2007. And so it ended up being just a huge blessing for me because it just put me in an uncomfortable territory and kind of put me out there. And, as even in high school, at a younger age, you do what's familiar. You do what's comfortable. As an adult now, I still skew toward that. I would always still skew toward what's comfortable, what's familiar. I'm a little bit more, I have more confidence. I'm more comfortable, in life now where I would put myself in those situations a little bit more willingly. But back then I would have never done that unless it was by force. No one would ever say, yeah, sure, switch me high school, senior year of high school, and it was tough, but it all worked out really well. It's interesting because that with college, in Hilliard, I would say it was probably 50-50. of friends that I knew that were going to college or just going to work or whatever it was. And then when I went to Jerome, every single person, I mean, we had a day of the school year where we went around and just everyone talked about the schools they were going to. Every single person, they had a 100% college rate.
Wow.
Every single person senior year was going to college. So I had planned, I had explored that, and I knew that I would probably do something, but it was just so implied that I kind of felt like, wow, okay, you have to do this, and I made friends with people whose parents were very successful. And so I was like, well, they obviously know, that college is what you got to do, and neither of my parents went to college. They're from small towns in Michigan. They were married at 18, had all 4 of their kids by 23. Again, I'm 35. I do not have kids. I mean, just a completely different upbringing and different lifestyle. And so, yeah, you're right. It was kind of implied and kind of like one of these things where it's like, my parents weren't breathing down my back, like you have to go to college, but it was certainly implied.
It was still that era, right?
Sure.
School,
Absolutely.
all that kind of stuff. I'm curious, what did you end up, what was kind of the focus of going to Ohio State? And then, what was maybe that point of time or that moment where you're saying, hey, this isn't for me anymore?
Yeah. So I went and I was doing strategic marketing was was going to be my focus. And ask me why, I have no idea. Truthfully, again, I was like, okay, I got to go to college, got to figure something out. Strategic marketing ended up being it. Had never taken a marketing class before that, specifically, but I went for about a year. And then actually my mom got sick and, I kind of, helping her out with some stuff, just like appointments and whatnot, and kind of just spending more time with her. I was like, what, this is, and I, and she was always, both my parents were always very, open to conversations about me not going to school or whatever. And, I was very transparent about that. And so that kind of gave me an excuse to be like, hey, let me take a step away from this. I really don't know what I'm doing here. And I don't know that this is getting me closer to a career path that I would want. So they were like, hey, cool, do that. I started working part-time in during that time. And that's kind of when that kind of leads into my real estate life.
Yeah. Take me down that path of, up until you decide to get my real estate license.
Yeah. So, I started working part-time, random jobs here and there. One was for like a financial firm. I was like entering spreadsheets on like a green and black screen, just like the most miserable thing you could think of. Just I would work Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for 5 hours in the afternoon from 12 to 5. And I would just literally, they would hand me stacks of invoices and I would just enter them on using code on a black and green screen. I mean, just like, and I was miserable. I mean, I just thought, wow, there are people, and listen, some people would say, listen, I don't have to talk to anyone. That is the most ideal job ever.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there is, that's appealing to a lot of people. And I understand that everyone's different. For me, I was like, oh my God, like this will never work, and so it was funny. I did that for a little bit. I was like, man, maybe I should go back to school, I did that for a little bit. Then I was like looking for other jobs. That was just not fun. That was out at a company in New Albany. And so I applied for a job, which was an office assistant, and got it. It was for Sandy Rains with the Rains Group.
Okay.
I was an office assistant. I got hired there in 2010, I want to say it was. 2010 to 2012, I worked for Sandy and I just did random stuff around the office and random help with her. Sandy is a huge established agent, has a huge team. Even 12 years ago, she had, 40 people working for her and was running a major operation. I was not involved in the real estate side of things whatsoever. Any further than delivering a sign occasionally.
Sure.
I did random tasks around the office and just random stuff. But it exposed me to real estate. It just put me around it and kind of gave me like front row seat to like what it was all about. And that's truly like when I fell in love with it. I was like, this is cool. She has some great agents on her team, that were on her team then, that are still on her team now. And I got to just see like, a day in their life. And it was just, I was like, wow, that is really cool. So that is actually what inspired me to get my real estate license. And I did.
I gotta ask you, because, of that time frame, how much did HGTV factor into this? Because it was a big decision for me. So
it's funny. It did factor into it.
No, I mean, look, I was, 2011 is when I got licensed, right? So I graduated 3 weeks later, met Ryan, my team lead, still with him to this day. And it was like, I wanted to get in for the flipping aspect of it, right? Because you saw all those flipping. I'm like, man, if they can make 70 grand, I can make 70 grand, right? So, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go learn real estate first, and then, do the investing stuff. And so I always joke, right? There's the HGTV era of real estate agents, and then I call it the COVID era of real estate agents, right? Like, so I was just curious of how much it factored in.
Yeah. Well, you know what? And it was also the very, very, very early beginnings of $1 Million Listing.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, like, it was like 2012, I think, is when that show came out, like, initially, or like shows like that. And so it definitely played into it for sure. So I was licensed in August of 2013 is when I got my license. So worked for Sandy. I was like, you know what, I'm going to get my real estate license. I was, at the time, not making a lot of money whatsoever, being paid fairly, for what I was doing, but not making a lot of money whatsoever. And I saw these agents just enjoying what they were doing and doing it well and making a lot of money. And I was like, wow, I think I would really enjoy this. Like, the most important thing, not sitting behind a desk all day, going out, meeting people, talking to people, looking at cool houses, the fun stuff that everyone thinks about realtors. What you don't think about is negotiating contracts and negotiating remedies and reading inspection reports and buying endless sets of washers and dryers for transactions to keep people happy. And I joke, I'm like, I have bought in my day probably 25 washers and dryers, none of which are my own. Okay. Like, I have bought a lot of people washers and dryers. It's been a lot of learning, so I was inspired by that. And I was like, that is something that I would like to do. And in my 2.5-ish, 3 years working for Sandy, I started off just strictly with office tasks, things like that. After, I would say, probably a year and a half, the secretary at the office left and they needed a fill-in. And so for about 6 months of time, I was working the front desk of their office and just answering phone calls and doing more real estate related tasks. And it kind of even pushed me more toward that, because I was like, this is something that I would like to do. And this is something that I would enjoy. And, I've always been a people person. I have always been social. And I find it easy to talk to people. I enjoy talking to people. And again, from that brief experience with the entering spreadsheets, I knew that the job, whatever job I was going to have, could not involve primarily sitting at a desk.
Yeah.
And so that's what kind of pushed me in that direction to get licensed.
Do you consider it luck that you got connected with her and the team?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. That's what I always say. I said earlier, I kind of fell into it. I mean, like, if that office assistant would have been for an attorney at a random office, like, who knows? I mean, I definitely would have ended up being an attorney. I can tell you that. But who knows, really? I mean, who knows? And maybe I would have got my real estate license in another path, or, in another path, another way. But yeah, I mean, the luck that kind of worked out like that.
Well, not only that, but did you know the level of production she was doing before even, submitting the application? Because that's the other piece of it. It's not like you just went to an agent that just got licensed last year, right? You went to, at the time, I think she was still number one, right? I think it was, her, Delina, and Joe Rudler, and some of those other, and so, like, for me, I always tell people, like, I got lucky when I got connected with Ryan. Now, Ryan was just an independent agent building a team, but it was his mindset of how he was thinking about real estate is why I always say got lucky, right? Because
absolutely. Yeah. And that is for sure, because it's funny. I always kind of skip over this part, but there was a 2-week period in there where I did get connected with someone else, another realtor, and who's no longer in the business and wasn't in the business very long. But I had submitted 2 applications, oddly enough, both to real estate offices. The one I kind of met, did like a short little gig with, quickly realized that it was not structured, it wasn't going to work. And then I interviewed with Sandy. So I always kind of skip over that part just because it's not super relevant in there. But yeah, the fact that I got, first off, 1 with a real estate company, 2, the real estate company, Sandy's company, because you know what? I implement things. I learned so much from that, just from like a bird's eye view. There are things that I do in my business today that I learned in 2012 watching Sandy do. You know, the number one thing that I stress to my team and every agent at my brokerage and everything is just the consistency in literally everything in your life, just consistency and how important that is. And I learned that from Sandy. I mean, you know, I've always had a strong work ethic. I learned that from myself, you know, and from my parents. And I have a passion for success and a passion for what I do. And those things all play into it. But there are so many things that I learned from Sandy, just witnessing the way she operates her team, the agents around her operate, that I implement in my business today. So, I mean, absolutely. So lucky, you know, that I was, again, found the real estate office and then the real estate office of Sandy. Cause I mean, again, it has definitely shaped my business.
Yeah. I'm curious, you know, Roger, when you decided to, hey, I'm going to actually go get my license, I think you said 2013 is when you did it. What was the inner circle like for you? Did they think you were crazy going to 100% commission-based business? Because it's not like, you know, it wasn't the downturn of real estate, but it wasn't what it is today. You know, values were still low, right? And so, you know, we were still dealing with foreclosures and short sales and, you know, those types of things, but it was on the way up. So I'm just curious, you know, your inner circle, did you have doubters, supporters? You know, where did people fall in your, you know, your immediate circle?
Yeah. So you know what, that time, I always say, like, all of my friends and my family, you know, my friends, you know, you're fresh out of college or, you know, kind of in college, you know, I had a little bit of everything. I had friends that were graduating and getting their first jobs and that were living more like adults than others. And then I had friends that were still kind of figuring it out. My friend group was kind of all over the place. You know, I will say I definitely heard like, okay, commission only, like, is that a good idea? Things like that. But, you know, I didn't have anyone that really doubted me, truthfully. You know, my parents have always been super, super supportive. And I never, I certainly think I surprised some people, you know, with my work ethic and with, you know, how badly I was, you know, how badly I wanted to succeed. I certainly, you know, at least I don't remember anyone specifically, you know, doubting me. I mean, I certainly, you know, naturally, as every dad would, oh, commission only, that's tough. Is that a good idea? Like, you know, you could get a job doing this and get a guaranteed paycheck, you know. But again, you know, no, just the typical stuff. No, real estate. I specifically remember the average house in Columbus was $153,000. I think it's probably double by now, if not a little bit more. There were a lot of foreclosures. So part of my job for Sandy related tasks was to go around to the vacant homes that they had listed and just check on them. And, you know, she always has had a really high price point. But even then, the number of vacant homes that were in distress or people that were losing homes was still common, you know, and Sandy was working in that market for sure. So completely different than what it is today. But, you know, I would say everyone around me was generally very supportive.
On building the business in the beginning, obviously, you know, did you remain on the team? You know, was there any thought process on how you want to build? Because again, you were young, right? I was young, like it's not like our friends at that time were graduating and getting these great jobs and buying houses. And I'm not from here, so at least you had kind of a network here. But how did you tap into your SOI? Did you focus on leads, open houses? How did you go about building the business?
So when I got started, first it was funny. So I got licensed when I worked for Sandy. I was super excited, got licensed August 13th of 2013. I was like, oh my gosh, I got my real estate license. This is great. Like, what can I do? And, kudos to them. They have their business model lined up. They do not accept brand new agents. That's always been their rule. No brand new agents. Sandy is established. Her team is busy. They do not have time for that. So I got licensed and I'm thinking, okay, I got a guaranteed job. I already work here. That was my bad. I should have, checked on that. That was not the case. It was a conflict of interest for me to be licensed and also working for Sandy at that time. So, very amicably, I left that. I had to leave the Reigns group. I still have such a great relationship with Sandy today. And talk to her occasionally and everyone over there I love. And obviously I work with them all the time. So, very amicable situation, but because I was now licensed and working for them doing administrative things, it was then a conflict of interest. So I left. A friend of mine, their mom was the manager at Keller Williams Consultants. So I met with her and I went there. I joined a team for about 6 months and, I was doing anything and everything to get a deal. I mean, I remember hand addressing envelopes to send out to every neighbor around me, dropping letters in for sale by owners mailboxes, reaching out to, Zillow at the time. You could list your house for sale by owner. I would call all those people constantly. I mean, I was doing everything that you could do to get business. Just all sorts of stuff. But I also had zero budget. So I was not doing, these nice mailers or things like that. And I was doing everything you could do for the least amount of money that you could because I did not have any money. And so joined a team for 6 months and then, quickly realized, it was helpful. I was getting some leads, but nothing was really panning out. All my business was coming from the stuff that I was doing on my own, and I thought, I'm just going to give it a go on my own. So I left the team after 6 months and I kind of had the mentality of I had just left this job where, again, I wasn't making a lot of money, but at least it was a steady income. It was paying my rent. And I was like, I'm going to go get into this. I had my first closing 4 weeks after I was licensed. So my first closing was September 13th of 2013. And, so I got my first paycheck. It was like $2,000. And, back then I could make that ride for a while too.
Yeah.
So I for a little bit that paid rent for, 2 months and got me in a good spot. Actually more than 2 months, probably 3 months, got me in a decent spot. And then I just kept rolling with it. And so again, I was motivated to succeed. I was at that point, I had given up a job with a regular paycheck. I had, left a team, to prove that I could do this on my own. So I was so motivated to make it work. I mean, I just, and again, I am from here, so it was nice having the sphere of influence, but, where I grew up in Dublin, my friends' parents had nice houses. I mean, they're not going to let this 24-year-old, licensed one sell their $1 million house in Tartan Fields. I mean, they're like, hey, we wish you the best of luck, but this is a huge investment.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask you next is, as a younger agent, maybe for someone maybe younger now getting into the business, for me too, I was 22, looked like I was 18, coming out of the era of people losing their homes.
Yeah.
How did you overcome, some of that, right? Because we were advising people that were 40, 50, 60 years old on this whole process of selling and buying at a time when there's still a lot of uncertainty going on of, is home ownership the right thing, right? So I'm curious, how did you overcome that?
Totally. Yeah. You know what? And it's funny because still today, I'm probably younger than 90% of my clients, but back then, and I remember actually being in a listing appointment one time, I sent a for sale by owner a letter. He called me. I'm like, oh my God, they called. So I go to the appointment. I'm there. And this guy, I ended up selling 2 houses for him. So it obviously worked out. But he said, "How old are you?" And I was like, I'm like 24. And he's like, "Really?" I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, good for you for working at 24 first, good for you." He said, "I feel like most people your age are not out here hustling." And he said, "But this is an expensive house, and this was a nice house. It was in River Trace neighborhood off of Dublin Road. Those houses are now probably 700,000. At the time, it was 365,000. And he was like, this is a big investment. He's like, why would I work with someone that, frankly, is younger than my kid? And I just said, I'm like, listen, like, everyone starts somewhere. And if you don't give me a shot, I said, just give me a shot. I'll work my ass off for you. I said, the difference between me and other realtors is that I absolutely need this and I will do whatever it takes to get it done.
Yeah.
And so I said, I can guarantee you that some other people might come in here and have more impressive resume. They're going to have more experience, but I can tell you that I am going to work so hard to get this done, not just because I want to succeed, but because I need this. And he was like, I'll give it a shot. He's like, I'll give it a shot. And he signed a 90-day listing agreement with me. And again, this is not, again, 2013, the market is so much different. I sold it in like a month, which now that house would sell with multiple offers in 2 days, but, and I got that all the time. That was just one that I remember because this guy just intimidated the hell out of me. And so I just remember that specifically.
Yeah. And I honestly think that new agents don't lean into that enough.
Completely agree.
I think they're so afraid to even have that conversation to just say, hey, like, I am new. I don't know it all. For me, like, it was the same thing. Like, hey, I don't know it all, but I have 2 experienced agents on my team that I can bounce anything off of. And I've learned hard lessons of trying to BS my way in and out of conversations and then have to go back and be like, hey, Roger, what I just told you an hour ago actually isn't true. Actually, this is what, but I think a lot of, I think actually though, my clients respected the fact that I just started to get to that point of just saying, hey, I don't know, right? Let me go get that answer for you. I promise I'll get it for you and I'll call you in 2 hours.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And that was one thing that I was always really fortunate to have. I always felt like I had good support around me. I was trying to figure it out. And I always felt like I had people that I could rely on and ask questions to. And that was really, really always helpful. And, as I got more experience and more confident, I was okay with just saying, hey, I'm not sure. But you get more comfortable. You get one under your belt, then you get a couple, then, you feel better. And I will tell you this though, you never know it all in real estate. Okay. I get transactions today, 12, 11 years later, however many transactions under my belt now, there are things that happen in a transaction today where I'm like, well, that's a first, Can I figure most stuff out on my own nowadays? Generally. But it is not uncommon for me to pick up the phone and call one of my colleagues. I mean, I call Mandy constantly and say, this is what happened. Like, well, what would you do? Just to bounce stuff off, like all the time. I mean, I call agents on my team that technically work for me and say, hey, this conversation I had, how would you handle this? I mean, that is so important. And it's such a nice thing to have. And I mean, that is such a fortunate thing to have too. And I will never not give credit to that, because I will say that is a huge, huge thing. And even I would call Sandy, I would call people from her team, and they were always so helpful. They never, and I feel like I have always surrounded myself with these type of people, but the people that are always willing to help and collaborate and not look at it as competition.
Yeah, 100%.
Which is humongous. I mean, it's just, that can make all the difference. And I will always give credit to those people. And I mean, work ethic or not, and no matter how driven I was, I have got to give credit to the people that were willing to answer the phone and help, because that helped a lot.
It's one of the pieces that I think a lot of agents leave out of the equation of what's the right place to go to. They, think splits or, technology training, but, depending on where you're at in your career and what you're trying to do and all of those things, like support should be
the most important thing, I think.
Exactly, right? Because if you don't have that, you don't know, you're making mistakes. The point of all of that is to minimize the mistakes, right? So that way you're making money instead of, dishing out your money, and to cover your CYA. So, Roger, take me down the journey of your then real estate career. Right now, you kind of have your own brokerage, urban living, downtown. When did you decide to build a team? When did you decide, why go and open up your own shop? What was kind of the mindset and progression of that?
Yeah. So I was at Keller Williams Consultants from 2013, 2015. Honestly, probably would have stayed there, but got approached with an opportunity early on in my career, which just, again, luck. I mean, luck and hard work. I always say, people say, "Oh my gosh, so lucky." I say, there's a lot of hard work behind it, but I will never doubt that there is some good luck on my side as well.
Yeah.
And some things falling into place and good timing and things like that. I mean, I would like to say that I've worked hard for every opportunity that's come across my plate, and I know that that's true, but there is such thing as good fortune as well, and some good luck too. This was a result of literally 2.5 years of busting my ass. And I am talking about working constantly. My friends, my family, everyone was blown away. I mean, I kind of went from chill, lackadaisical to working all the time. I wanted to succeed. And 2.5 years in, I was doing pretty well. I wasn't rolling in it, but I had consistent business. I had listings. I was staying consistently busy. And again, that is hard, even for a realtor today, 2 years in. I think anyone would tell you that it is a roller coaster. You will have dry spells and so I was doing well. And a friend of mine was doing marketing for Casto, the developer, and reached out and said, "Hey, they're looking for someone to kind of run their residential brokerage here. They've got some exciting projects coming up, and they're looking for someone, that's hungry and willing to, work their ass off." Met with Casto, great opportunity, jumped all over it. I could not believe they wanted to speak to me. Jumped all over it. So I was kind of started their residential brokerage alongside some other, Casto vets, and ran their residential brokerage with them. Had the opportunity to sell 2 developments for them in that period of time.
Nice.
And just get really good experience around guys that had been in real estate their whole life, mostly commercial guys. So not necessarily directly what I was doing, but just, people that were living and breathing real estate. I just got to be around that, and I was immersed in it, because that's all that Casto is real estate development, leasing and sales, residential development, all sorts of stuff. So did that. It was great. It was such a helpful move. And it was so helpful on one end, and on the other end, it was so difficult, because I was starting this residential brokerage for them, and here they are, a family-owned business that is primarily commercial real estate and development. They had no idea what it took to do a residential brokerage, and neither did I. And so we were kind of figuring it out together, but it was so tough. It was I went from Keller Williams, where they had everything, all the resources, to Casto, where it was you're running this brokerage. I'm I've been licensed for 2.5 years. I should not be running this brokerage. And so it was such a good learning experience for me, to just find out, what goes into that. Because, I had, from day one, I had big dreams. Once I decided real estate was it, I'm real estate is it. I'm going to own my own business. I'm going to have a team. I'm going to do this, and it's easy to look at, work for Sandy as an assistant and look and say, "Oh, I'll be her one day." But not knowing what goes into that and what that all entails is a whole different thing. No one handed her that position, and honestly, no amount of money could just put you in that position. Hard work and putting in the time is all that's going to get you there. And so left Casto after about 2.5 years, went to Coldwell Banker just for a landing spot. And then from Coldwell Banker was, I knew the next move, at this point, this was 3 years ago. I knew the next move needed to be a final, I don't want to say final, but needed to be my landing spot. This needed to be my move. You know, my team, I had 6 people on my team. I was kind of mentoring 10 other agents that I didn't want to necessarily bring on my team, but I didn't want to just brush off. I didn't really know what to do with. But I was kind of, you know, I was kind of running a brokerage without running a brokerage. You know, I had people using me as a resource constantly, and got in really good conversation with Keller Williams and Dana Gentry, the operating partner for the Midwest. Just really hit it off with Dana and just loved everything, you know, that she had to say. And Keller Williams' setup and everything worked for me. And so that was kind of that helped. But, you know, I told her, I was very direct. I said, you know, going to an office in Dublin makes no sense for me. That is not my market. You know, my market has been focused on urban. You know, this has been my brand for, you know, this is what I've built my brand around. I was selling a ton in Victorian Village. I was doing a lot downtown in German Village and, you know, in the Arena District. And it just made no sense for me to go there. And I said, I need to find something else. I said, I want to be in business with you, but I will not join an office in Dublin. It makes no sense for me. So that opened up the door to multiple conversations. And, you know, long story short, we ended up opening, I ended up opening, you know, the downtown urban living office. So, and it's been great. Oh my gosh, it's been a long, rewarding road though. You know, it's crazy to think about, but I think I'm like 3 years in, maybe even longer at this point. Honestly, I've lost track. You know, throw COVID in there and it, you know, messes with the timeline. I'm not really sure.
Yeah. Specifically, was it always your intention or design to do real estate business downtown, or did it just kind of happen that way?
No, it was always intended. Yeah. It was intended. You know, I wanted to live downtown. I liked the lifestyle. I knew that was going to be my lifestyle. I didn't, you know, in my mind, I always thought, okay, where I live is what I want to do, you know, like where I live is where I want to sell. You know, I truly thought that, okay, I want my brand to be my lifestyle and, you know, and so that was kind of my thought. And so I was living in Victorian Village, really loved it. I mean, I loved everything about the neighborhood, everything about the area. And so I was like, I want to sell here. And then, so, you know, and I was still doing some stuff here and there in the suburbs and enjoyed it, but I really enjoyed the urban part of Columbus. And honestly, I think what's been the most exciting that even pushed me more toward that was just downtown has changed so much over the past couple of years, and everything happening downtown was just so exciting. And there were really, in my opinion, no agents just focusing on that. You know, like Sandy had such a grasp on New Albany. And I remember like part of their, like, you know, I was one time overhearing a meeting that they were talking about marketing and things like that. And it was like, how you need to focus on an area and have your area and all this. And so like in my mind, it was like, what is from day one, like, although I was working anywhere I could get a house, you know, anywhere I could get a listing or a buyer, of course, in the early years. But after that, it was like, where I'm going to focus my energy and my time is going to be where I want to work. And so and I decided that would be downtown. And so I made that my brand, and I lived there. I you know, spent my free time there. I worked there. You know, it truly is my lifestyle, but it was intentional for sure. You know, I mean, I moved to Park's Edge knowing that I was going to own this building. You know, it was all intentional. It's not, you know, that wasn't by luck.
Right. Well, and I think, you know, sometimes, and you mentioned in the beginning, sometimes you don't have a choice, right? You're just scrapping for business anywhere, money, right? Because, you know, most people don't. And that's why, you know, I was saying, like, most people don't have the cap. Like for me, I didn't have the capital. I didn't have the knowledge. I didn't understand sales. I didn't understand real estate. I didn't even know anything about houses at the time. Like I couldn't tell you a furnace from an AC unit to a hot water, you know? And so I think, you know, in the beginning, and I don't think there's a right way or wrong way. That's why I like asking these types of questions. Like you were eventually got very intentional with how you do business. Even me to this day, like I'm very more shotgun approach, right? Like we cover everywhere in Central Ohio, and there's no right or wrong. I think it's just really thinking about how do you want to grow your business, you know, not just in the next 12 months, but the next 10 years or 15 years.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because, I always say, like, I fell into real estate, fell into it. And then, and again, worked all over the place. And then it was just kind of like, I want to be intentional about building my brand, and that's where, I said early on, I learned so much from Sandy. That was kind of one of those things that I pulled from her, was like, okay, building your brand, like kind of building that into your brand. But Sandy still sells everywhere. I mean, she has a listing in the building next door. And so that's the thing, like my team sells all over the place, but it was just like what I wanted my brand to be and our focus to be and our time and energy was urban. And so that was one thing, that just didn't fall into place. It kind of fell into place because I moved to Victorian Village just wanting to move into a cool neighborhood, but then I fell in love with it and was like, okay, I want this to be my brand. And so it was intentional, and it's become more intentional now, but kind of happened by chance earlier on, for sure. And, I think early on in your career, everyone's in the spot where you just you gotta do what you got, I mean, it's like if someone called me in Reynoldsburg, I'd, be there in 10 minutes, Today, if someone calls me for a Reynoldsburg listing, I would have someone on my team handle it. Or if a buyer is looking in Powell, that's going to be handled by, Britt on my team, but that is one thing that I have stayed intentional with, is kind of moving forward, kind of building the brand around what I wanted it to be. And that is just one of, I'm in a fortunate position now where I can do that.
Yeah.
But early on, new agents come to me and they're like, I really want to focus here. I'm like, you need to focus wherever you can get a listing. Wherever you can get business is where you need to focus. Okay. Yeah. Make your marketing around this area or whatever, where you want to be, and hone in on that. But you need to be willing, the new agents that are like, oh, I don't want to sell it there, I don't want to work with that buyer over there. I'm like, I don't know, unless you got someone funding, paying your rent. I don't know. I would be in that showing. I can guarantee it. I remember showing houses in cities that I've never heard of in Ohio. Literally driving like an hour and a half to show $150,000 house. Like, I was working anyone that would work with me.
Yeah. It's one of those things where, I think in today's era, right, with TV and even our era, right, like our era was more of like the flipping and all that kind of stuff. But now it's like the $1 million listings, right? The Sirhan, owning Manhattan, all those things where it's like, I want to work luxury. And I'm like, okay, I get it. But, I get it, but you don't necessarily have the skills or the experience or the knowledge or the capital to get there yet. And I'll tell you, like, to this day, I share this story. A client of mine, back in, I think it was 2013. I forget the exact timelines, but it was a $30,000 cash deal. Don and Rita Williams, I still remember their name. And they referred me someone that was a sell and buy situation. I think they sold for like 250, 260. And then they ended up buying for like 125. They were like a move down, right?
Yeah.
Then they referred me to another person. That person's house was like a $500,000 listing. Mm-hmm. They ended up downsizing, into a $175,000 home or something like that. And so like one $30,000 deal that was cash, right, turned into, all of these other opportunities. And so I think so many times people just judge by the cover, and in that moment of, this is the dollar amount I'm going to get, instead of, I'm always like, hey, is this a 1-year play for you to be a real estate agent, or is this a career choice? Because if it's the career choice, yes, we have to think about today because we have today's bills, but we also have to build for tomorrow in the future. And this is another person that you're adding to that client database, that if you do a great job and you follow up and you stay in front of them, you will get further opportunities as your career goes on.
100%. I completely agree with that. And you know what? I had like a full circle moment like 6 months ago. One of my first deals, not one of my first, or very early on, maybe 2014, I sold a $40,000 house in Whitehall to a really young guy. He was probably my age at the time. I mean, he was young, maybe even younger. And he called me probably a year to 6 months ago to sell it. And he, said, I don't know if you remember me. And I remembered immediately. I remember, honestly, like, I may not be able to rattle off names like off the top of my head. If you call me, I'm like triggered. I realize, I'm like, okay, I remember you. So he's like, you may not remember me. I'm like, no, I remember you. You bought a house on, Martin Avenue or something. And he was like, oh my God. Yeah. he was like, well, it looks like you're selling way too expensive homes to help me anymore, but I want to sell my house. And I was like, absolutely not. Like, you know, I am not, you know, too busy to help you. I'm like, you were one of my first transactions. Like, let's meet. It'll be great to catch up. And it was just so full circle because he said, you know how many people I called to show me homes that were $40,000 that ignored, that did not help me. And he said, you ran me around everywhere I wanted to go, you know, and I don't remember this, but he was like, you showed me probably 10 houses and then you worked that deal. And you know, what I'm thinking is like, I needed that money, believe me, you know, but it was just kind of full circle. Cause I'm like, wow, like that's amazing. And like to get a call from someone like that was just amazing. And, you know, he's had that house as just an investment property now. He, you know, and he was going to buy another house, you know, and he actually moved out of state for a while. And then I helped him buy another house, you know, and so it is just full circle and where things come from. And I helped a neighbor's daughter of mine one time who I did not know was my neighbor's daughter, helped her sell a house. It was a condo that she had bought for her kid that was in college. It's like $130,000 condo off Sawmill Road. I sold that for her. Went well. She didn't really stay in touch, whatever, you know, super easy transaction. A couple years later, in Park's Edge, someone's like, man, I feel like I know you. I'm like, yeah, maybe, cool. You know, and just being neighborly. Come to find out her parents live in Park's Edge, you know, through just a chain of conversation, me getting to know them, come to find out, you know, that was her mom and dad. And they figured out it was me that helped their daughter and all this stuff. And she was in such a rough spot and, you know, going through a divorce and all this stuff. And, you know, they had a good friend that was a real estate. He owned a company with some guy who had a real estate license, mostly sold commercial. But when they sold their $1.6 million condo in Park's Edge last year, he called me and said, I just remember all the nice things my daughter had to say about you. And I want to tell you that I will get an earful of shit from my business partner for not using him to sell this. But he said, I remember how hard you worked for her and how much, you know, that meant to her. And he said, I just will never forget that. And he said, so we'd like for you to sell our condo. Sold that condo for him, sold him another condo in the building next door, you know, all from that. So like, I always tell people, like, do not burn bridges. Columbus is the biggest small town ever. You will, you know, people will come out of the woodwork and there are connections all over the place, and how you treat people is so important, and the connections you make and keeping those are so important. And I just think, I mean, life in general, not just because there's benefits to come from it, believe me. You know, I just think that, you know, I mentioned it earlier with people seeing things as competition all the time versus helping people. You know, I really want to be seen, and I really want to be known as someone that is willing to help people. And you know, I financially benefit from doing well in real estate, obviously. I mean, I'm not saying that, you know, that has nothing to do with why I work, but it is so rewarding to hear things like that and to work with people that truly appreciate it. And, you know, I'm impacted by the impact I can make on them. And, you know, hopefully in a positive way, even if it's a negative situation. You know, she was going through a divorce and had a lot of financial troubles and all these things, you know, but even being a positive part of a negative situation is nice. And again, like, the impact I make on them impacts me. And so that's rewarding to hear. And sometimes I think, you know, being in the business and doing a ton of deals all the time, you start to forget some of that stuff sometimes. And it's nice to kind of be grounded and kind of be humbled by hearing those stories occasionally. And, you know, the call from my client in Whitehall was one of those that really it was just really nice to hear. And it was like, you know, because, you know, 12 years in, you can forget. It's like, okay, cool transaction. You know, you have a great relationship with the people, but they're not in any dire situation. So it's like just another deal. So, you know, it's nice to kind of slow down and think of those things. And you know, I love when that happens.
I want to kind of transition. I know we're getting past time here, but rapid fire questions.
Yeah, sure.
About the future. What's a goal you're looking to accomplish in the next 12 months?
Oh man, put me on the spot. I have a very aggressive goal of growing my team and brokerage much larger. You know, inappropriate time. So I'm not necessarily sure that is an appropriate answer for in the next 12 months, but we have an aggressive goal to grow.
What's the goal in the next 5 years?
Grow times 25.
What do you think you would have to have in place in order to do that?
Oh man, a lot. The support. I mean, again, give credit to everyone that has provided me support over the years. I mean, it's literally why I'm here, whether it be in my business or in my personal life. I mean, the support of, my family and friends has been huge. Encouragement from, everyone in my personal life, my boyfriend, just my sisters, parents, everybody, has been huge. The encouragement is such a big piece to it, even at a point in my career where, people might think, oh, it's easy for you now, which is not the case. Just FYI, but, but the support is so huge personally and professionally. If you look at any great agent or any super successful business in general, the support that they have around them, oftentimes the people that you're not hearing from, not the people that are front facing, is what keeps that moving, and so we have a great support system now. Mandy Mancini, who a lot of people know, she's an incredible agent. She's been doing well. We started early on together. She's been, my one of my best friends, and been, kind of like my business partner for several years as well, even when we were at different brokerages. She helps with the office and the growth and things like that. We have Nathan that's helping with the recruiting and meeting with new agents. And we have, people that do the onboarding. We have Brian that helps with marketing. And it's just more of that. It's more of these great people that are running the show behind the scenes. I think what people always think is, oh, more business, you want more business to continue to grow. Yes, we absolutely do. But it is all the support that we need. I mean, we need the support behind the scenes, and that really, without those people, we truly would not be able to, even do what we do today, but certainly not be able to achieve our goals of growth. And I'm confident we'll get there.
Yeah. What's a legacy goal for you?
That's a tough question. I mean, I think honestly, to build something that goes beyond me personally, I'm 35. I don't plan to do sales my whole life. What that is, I don't know, but build something that goes beyond me. I mean, I'll have kids someday, and, a business that they could potentially work at or be proud of. Something that, maybe my nieces and nephews could work at, or even if no one ended up working at, I don't want it to be one of those things where it's like the parent forcing kids to take over their business, but something that goes beyond me that can help, that can just help people, so something that's bigger than Roger, So again, what that looks like, I don't know. That is a deep question that I have not given enough thought to, but definitely something that goes just beyond my existence of physically being here and working.
Last question for you. If you could give the audience one piece of advice that maybe you did receive, or maybe now that you give out, if agents ask you, what would that be?
Stay consistent in whatever you're doing. It will take so much hard work to succeed. I mean, there is no cheat code to getting there quicker. You will not be in the business for 2 years and be the highest selling luxury agent. If someone tells you you will, it won't happen. It will not happen. Putting in your time and working hard and staying consistent is what it takes. And you'll learn a lot of lessons along the way. And it may feel like a long road, but if you stay consistent and you work hard and be honest and have integrity and care about that, then you will succeed. And I think consistency is the number one thing I drive into everybody. There are things that I do in my business today that I did from day one. And I truly think that is why I'm where I'm at today.
Spot on. I think I think it's the only thing that truly matters.
Yeah.
To be honest with you. So I always say, there's a great book called The Power of Consistency by Weldon Long. You have the classic compound effect, right?
Yeah.
Then you have Atomic Habits, James Clear right here in Bexley, Ohio. The one that kind of worked best for me most recently is a book called The Power of Consistency by Weldon Long. And it's one thing I tell my agents all the time is you can't do the right things for a long period of time and get the wrong results.
Yep.
Right. It's just impossible. Right. It's just a matter of time at that point. So,
Yep.
look, if you guys are watching this or listening to this, if you're thinking of selling a house, buying a house, if you're a real estate agent and you want to connect with Roger to talk about his team or his brokerage, his information is down below. It's been down below on the screen. But Roger, for those that are listening into the podcast on the audio version, what is the best way for a homeowner, a buyer, or even a real estate agent to connect with you to just talk about real estate?
Yeah, the best way would just shoot me an email. My personal email is urbanliving@kw.com. Just the word urbanliving@kw.com. Would love to hear from anybody.
Roger, thanks so much for your time today. I really enjoyed getting to learn a little bit more about your business and as well as your journey to real estate. I know someone watching this, whether they're newer to the business or maybe they're in that phase of like, I don't know if college is for me or whatever the case may be. It's going to have a lasting impact on them. So I really appreciate your time. And if there's anything I can do for you, to pay you back for coming on to my show and sharing, please let me know. I'm here to help you and support you any way that I can.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I really enjoyed this. I really appreciate your time and thanks for having me on.
Awesome. We'll talk again here soon.
All right. Sounds good, John.
See ya.
Bye.